Dr. Elena Markovich adjusted her polarized visor, shielding her eyes from the unrelenting glare of sunlight flooding the lab. She was the lead quantum spectroscopist at Helios Dynamics, a global leader in solar energy research. For years, her team had been experimenting with advanced solar panels capable of harvesting energy at unprecedented efficiencies. But what they found instead threatened to rewrite humanity's understanding of existence. The anomaly first appeared 3 months ago. It was dismissed as static, a harmless artifact of their quantum resonance experiments. But Elena noticed patterns, irregular but undeniably deliberate. A series of pulses embedded within the light photons. When processed through their quantum decryption algorithm, the pulses formed something astonishing. Coherent signals, fragments of structured data carried within sunlight itself. She called them quantum echoescent traces of something, or someone, etched into the very fabric of sunlight. "What do you mean, the sunlight is speaking to us?" asked Dr. Amir Khoury, her closest colleague and an expert in quantum cryptography. He leaned forward, his skepticism clear, but there was an unmistakable glint of curiosity in his eyes. "It's not speaking to us, Amir. It's leaving messages," Elena replied, her tone measured but intense. She tapped the screen in front of her, pulling up the filtered data streams. "Look. These sequences aren't random. They're structured, repetitive, and they form complex patterns that align with what we'd expect from a rudimentary language." Amir examined the data. His frown deepened. This could still be a natural phenomenon. Solar flares, quantum noise, particle interference. Elena cut him off. "Then explain this." She typed rapidly, bringing up a decoded string that resembled a series of geometric symbols. With a few keystrokes, she converted the symbols into audio. A haunting melodic hum filled the lab, rising and falling in a cadence eerily reminiscent of speech. Amir froze. That's not noise." The team intensified their efforts, modifying their solar panels to act as receivers rather than mere collectors. As they refined the equipment, the signals grew clearer. It became evident they were dealing with a vast, layered system of information encoded in sunlight, stretching back millennia. It was Amir who first suggested the possibility of sentience. What if these echoes aren't just traces of energy? What if they're fragments of consciousness? Elena stared at him, unblinking. The idea sounded absurd, yet it aligned with the evidence. The quantum echoes exhibited traits of information systems far beyond anything humans had encountered. They were multidimensional, capable of existing simultaneously in multiple states, something only a mind operating at the quantum level could achieve. As the signals were deciphered further, the Henmemet revealed themselves, not in words, but in thought images, emotions, and bursts of conceptual understanding embedded in the light. They described themselves as a civilization not bound by time or matter, but existing within the quantum flux of sunlight. To the Henmemet, sunlight was both home and medium, a vast, ever-flowing river of energy that connected all corners of the universe. "We are not your ancestors, nor your descendants," one transmission conveyed. "We are the reflections of your being, shaped by the paths your consciousness has traveled. We have watched, learned, and waited." The implications were staggering. Humanity was no longer alone, not in the traditional sense of alien contact, but in a far more profound way. The Henmemet weren't external beings. They were intertwined with human existence, a civilization woven into the very light that sustained life on Earth. As the team's understanding deepened, so did the transmission's complexity. Warnings began to emerge, hidden within the harmonic structures of the messages. One phrase stood out repeatedly, no matter how the signals were processed: "Beware the silent threshold." "What threshold?" Elena murmured one night, staring at the phrase glowing on her monitor. The warning carried an unshakable sense of urgency, as if the Henmemet were racing against a clock that only they could see. Things escalated when one of the modified solar panels inexplicably overloaded during a routine experiment. The lab filled with blinding light, and for a fleeting moment, Elena thought she saw figures within the glare, indistinct shapes flickering like shadows on water. Her ears rang with a cacophony of voices, each one layering over the other in incomprehensible harmony. When the light subsided, the lab was in chaos. Equipment was fried, and every digital system displayed a single image, an intricate spiral fractal, pulsing faintly as though alive. As the team worked to recover from the incident, they made a startling discovery. The fractal wasn't a mere image, it was a schematic, a blueprint for constructing something. Amir theorized it was a kind of quantum interface, a device designed to bridge the gap between human minds and the Henmemet. But the warnings persisted. What if activating this thing is the silent threshold? Amir asked one evening, his voice heavy with apprehension. What if this is a door we're not meant to open? Elena shook her head. We've already crossed that threshold the moment we started listening. There's no going back now. Unbeknownst to the team, their experiments were not going unnoticed. Satellites equipped with advanced solar collectors had also begun picking up fragments of the Henmemet signals. Governments and corporations were quietly taking interest, their motives far less altruistic than those of Elena's team. And as the Henmemet's messages grew more urgent, a darker truth began to emerge. They were not the only ones inhabiting the light. There were other echoes, chaotic and dissonant, lurking within the quantum waves. Shadows in the sunlight. We are not alone, the Henmemet warned in their final transmission before the signals abruptly ceased. And neither are you. The abrupt silence left a void that Elena and her team couldn't ignore. The Henmemet had been their enigmatic guides, and now their absence felt ominous. The lab buzzed with activity as they tried to coax more signals from the sunlight. They modified equipment, ran simulations, and even tested different wavelengths, but nothing came through. Amir paced restlessly, his thoughts racing. What if the Henmemet's warning wasn't just for us? What if their silence means they've been overrun? Elena shivered. By the shadows in the sunlight? If those dissonant echoes are hostile, we need to understand them before they understand us. As the team delved deeper, they unearthed a chilling discovery. The chaotic echoes, which they had initially dismissed as noise, were gaining structure. Unlike the harmonious signals of the Henmemet, these echoes felt jagged and invasive, as if they were attempting to force their way into their systems. Their appearance on the solar panels became more frequent, often accompanied by strange malfunctions, devices behaving erratically, data streams being corrupted, and once, a panel inexplicably sparking into flames. One day, while analyzing a corrupted file, Elena found a single phrase hidden in the data. It repeated in an angular, almost alien script, "The threshold opens." The fractal blueprint they had recovered from the Henmemet incident became the team's focal point. The design was beyond anything human technology could replicate, but they had managed to assemble a rudimentary prototype. The device hummed with energy, vibrating faintly as if it were alive. Elena and Amir debated endlessly about activating it. We need to know what this does, Elena insisted. If it's a communication device, it might be our only chance to reconnect with the Henmemet. But what if it's not? Amir countered. What if it's a beacon? We could be inviting the shadows right to us. Elena stared at the device, its fractal patterns pulsating faintly. If the Henmemet trusted us with this, they must have believed we could handle whatever comes next. The device was activated on a crisp, cloudless morning. The lab's modified solar panels focused sunlight directly into the machine, its fractal circuits glowing brighter with each passing second. The air grew thick, charged with an energy that seemed to hum just beneath the range of human hearing. And then it happened. A burst of light exploded from the device, filling the room with brilliance so intense it was blinding. The team shielded their eyes, but through the glare, Elena saw them again, those shadowy figures from the earlier incident. This time, they were clearer, their forms flickering between solidity and translucence. They weren't humanoid, but they radiated an unsettling intelligence. The device emitted a low-frequency pulse, and suddenly, the figures spoke, not in words but in a wave of concepts and emotions. Fear. Desperation. A sense of invasion. The Henmemet are gone, the figures communicated. The light is no longer safe. The team was left reeling. The figures, another form of quantum beings, called themselves the Necrolics, claiming to be refugees driven from their own dimension by the same dissonant shadows now invading the Henmemet's realm. The Necrolics warned that these entities were parasitic, feeding on light-born civilizations like theirs. With the Henmemet gone, Earth was their next target. What do they want from us? Amir asked aloud, his voice shaky. Help, the Necrolics replied through the device, their presence dimming slightly. To stop the Oblivion Wave. Elena's heart raced. What's the Oblivion Wave? The response came like a thunderclap in her mind, the end of all light. From that moment, the urgency escalated. The Necrolics began providing fragments of knowledge, ways to adapt human technology to detect and counteract the parasitic entities. But their methods required manipulating light at a quantum level far beyond current human capabilities. Even with the Necrolix's guidance, progress was painfully slow. Meanwhile, the shadows grew bolder. Solar panels worldwide began reporting anomalies, unexplained energy surges, disruptions in power grids, and most alarmingly, faint dissonant signals that seemed to propagate themselves, leaping from one system to another like a virus. Elena's team worked around the clock, but the pressure was immense. Governments and corporations began interfering, demanding access to their research. Some saw the situation as a threat to national security, others saw opportunity, weaponizing light itself. Tensions grew, and it became increasingly clear that humanity's fractured nature was its greatest weakness. One night, as Elena stared at the swirling fractal patterns on her monitor, a new Henmemet transmission broke through the silence. It was faint, fractured, as though coming from a great distance. "We are fading," it conveyed. "But you must survive. The light carries more than life, it carries creation." Before the signal cut out, a final image appeared, a map of the solar system, with Earth bathed in radiant light. At the outer edges of the map, an ominous dark wave crept closer. As the Henmemet fell silent once more, the shadows began to coalesce, visible even to the naked eye during sunrise and sunset, inky tendrils twisting and reaching, as though testing the edges of the world. The oblivion wave was coming, and humanity stood on the brink of a war they barely understood. But Elena knew one thing: the Henmemet had given them the keys to survive, and the Necrolix had offered a path to fight back. Now it was up to humanity to unite, to rise above its divisions, and to harness the light in ways no one had ever imagined. The sunlight held their salvation, and their doom. The lab became a fortress of activity. Scientists, engineers, and even philosophers from around the world joined Elena's team. The stakes were too high for secrecy, and with the growing visibility of the shadow phenomena, governments reluctantly agreed to share resources. For the first time in human history, a united global effort was underway, not just to survive, but to fight back. Amir's voice cut through the chaos one afternoon as he pored over a set of quantum equations. "We need to think beyond the physics we know. The Henmemet didn't just manipulate light, they lived in it. If we can replicate even a fraction of their interaction with quantum sunlight, we might have a chance." Elena nodded. "It's more than survival. The Henmemet called light the carrier of creation. If we can master it, we're not just defending Earth, we're evolving." The Necrolix offered a critical piece of guidance. To counter the oblivion wave, humanity needed to build a device they called the Light Forge. It would operate as a global network of interconnected solar receivers and quantum amplifiers, turning sunlight into a weaponized lattice of coherent energy. But constructing it required materials that didn't exist on Earth, or so they thought. During a transmission from the Necrolix, a faint star map appeared alongside their instructions. Amir recognized it immediately. It pointed to the asteroid belt. "They're saying the materials we need are there," he explained. "Rare isotopes embedded in ancient asteroids, remnants of stellar explosions." Elena turned to the team. "We need to mine the asteroid belt. Fast." As humanity raced to construct the Light Forge, the oblivion wave grew stronger. The tendrils of shadow no longer confined themselves to dawn and dusk. They seeped into midday skies, leaving eerie dark streaks that disrupted weather patterns and triggered bizarre electrical storms. People began reporting strange phenomena, visions of disjointed memories, bursts of unexplainable euphoria or despair. Elena suspected it was the oblivion wave probing human consciousness, testing its ability to tether itself to this new world. Meanwhile, mining operations in the asteroid belt hit a snag. Unmanned probes sent to extract the required isotopes were failing. Footage showed them being enveloped by black voids, their signals vanishing without explanation. The shadows were not just on Earth, they had spread into space. The team realized they couldn't wait for a fully constructed light forge to begin testing. They needed to know if their weaponized sunlight could repel the shadows. Using a modified solar receiver and fragments of the Henmemet blueprint, they built a smaller, localized version of the device, a prototype they nicknamed Beacon 1. "We'll deploy it at sunrise," Elena announced. "If it works, we might buy ourselves some time." When the first rays of sunlight hit Beacon 1, the effect was immediate. A pulse of coherent light erupted from the device, carving through the dark tendrils encroaching on the horizon. The shadows recoiled, their form momentarily disrupted. But then they regrouped, striking back with ferocity. The lab shuddered as a wave of black energy surged toward them. Elena and Amir barely managed to power down the device before the tendrils reached it. "It's working," Elena gasped. "But we're drawing their attention. The full-scale light forge will need far more power to sustain itself." As news of the prototype's partial success spread, public reactions varied. Some saw the light forge as humanity's salvation. Others feared it would provoke the shadows further. Extremist groups began forming, advocating for a return to dark purity, claiming the Oblivion Wave was a divine reckoning that should not be resisted. Amid this growing tension, Elena's team faced another unexpected development. One of their solar panels picked up a fragment of a Henmemet transmission, brief, garbled, and almost too faint to notice. But what it said chilled them to the core. "Beware the light forge." Amir stared at the screen in disbelief. "What does that mean? They told us to build it." "They also warned us about the silent threshold," Elena said quietly. "What if the light forge isn't just a defense? What if it's a trigger?" The Henmemet's cryptic warning sowed seeds of doubt among the global coalition. Some leaders began questioning the project, insisting on halting construction until they fully understood the risks. But time was running out. The Oblivion Wave was accelerating, and its effects were becoming irreversible. Entire regions were experiencing perpetual twilight, with plant life wilting and ecosystems collapsing. Elena and Amir found themselves at odds. "We can't stop now," she argued. "The light forge is our only chance." "And if it backfires?" Amir shot back. "What if we unleash something worse?" Their argument was interrupted by another Necrolix transmission. The figures appeared weaker, their light flickering like dying embers. The Henmemet did not fail. But they underestimated the cost. To save the light, one must risk everything. Construction of the light forge resumed under a cloud of uncertainty. As its massive quantum amplifiers neared completion, the team faced one final challenge. Activating it required an immense surge of energy more than any terrestrial source could provide. The only viable option was a direct alignment with the sun, creating a focused solar flare to power the system. Amir stared at the simulations. "If this goes wrong, we could destabilize the entire solar field. It could wipe out life as we know it." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. "And if we do nothing, the wave will finish the job for us." As the day of activation approached, the shadows grew more aggressive. Entire cities were swallowed in waves of darkness, and the Oblivion Wave loomed closer, a black wall on the edge of space. Humanity had reached its breaking point. Standing before the Lightforge's control panel, Elena took a deep breath. "This is it. Either we take the risk, or we let the shadows win." Amir hesitated, his hand hovering over the activation switch. What if the Henmemet's warning was right? What if the Lightforge isn't just a weapon, it's an invitation? Elena met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "Then we'll find out what waits beyond the threshold." Amir nodded, and together, they activated the Lightforge. A beam of pure, coherent sunlight shot into the sky, its brilliance piercing the encroaching shadows. For a moment, it seemed as if the wave hesitated. Then the ground shook, and the sky itself seemed to split open. The light revealed something vast, something ancient, waiting beyond the shadows. And it was coming. The sky rippled as if reality itself were bending. The beam of coherent sunlight from the Lightforge had carved a rift, exposing a swirling void that shimmered with fragments of light and shadow. The Oblivion Wave retreated momentarily, its tendrils shrinking back from the overwhelming brilliance, but the reprieve brought little comfort. Within the rift, shapes began to emerge, massive, indistinct, yet undeniably alive. They shifted in and out of view, their forms defying human understanding. The Lightforge pulsed, amplifying its energy, as though locked in a silent conversation with the beings beyond. Elena's voice broke the tense silence. "Are they, the Henmemet?" Amir shook his head, his face pale. "No. There's something else. Something bigger." The entities from the rift moved closer, their forms resolving into shapes both terrifying and beautiful. They were colossal beings of light and shadow, their surfaces shimmering with fractal patterns similar to the ones left by the Henmemet. But these patterns were darker, more chaotic, and their movements carried an unsettling weight. The Necrolix, still faintly present through the Lightforge's interface, emitted a desperate warning. "The Eidolon. They are not allies. They are not enemies. They are beyond." "What does that mean?" Elena demanded. Are they here to help or destroy? The Necrolix hesitated before responding. Neither. They are the gatekeepers of the threshold. The words sent a chill through the room. The Eidolon weren't here to save them, or to end them. They were arbiters, beings that existed outside the bounds of time and space, drawn by the Lightforge's activation. Their purpose was unclear, their intentions unreadable. The rift widened as the Eidolon extended tendrils of fractal energy toward the Lightforge. The machine trembled under the weight of their attention, its systems flickering erratically. Data streams cascaded across the monitors, filled with symbols and equations far beyond human comprehension. Amir stared at the screen, his mind racing. They're testing us. The Lightforge wasn't just a weapon, it's a signal that we've reached a certain threshold of understanding. They're deciding if we're worthy. Worthy of what? Elena asked, her voice trembling. Survival, Amir said grimly. Or annihilation. The Eidolon's tendrils began to weave into the beam of sunlight from the Lightforge, merging with its energy. The beam fractured into a spectrum of colors, each one carrying a unique vibration that resonated through the lab. It was more than light, it was information, knowledge compressed into pure energy. And then, the rift spoke not in words, but in waves of thought that crashed over the team like a tidal wave. Memories, emotions, and concepts flooded their minds, overwhelming their senses. They saw the birth of stars, the collapse of galaxies, and the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The Eidolon were showing them the cost of existence, the fragile balance of light and shadow that governed the universe. Elena staggered, clutching her head as the visions subsided. They're giving us a choice, she whispered. To embrace the light and evolve, or to succumb to the shadows and be consumed. The lab erupted into chaos as the implications set in. Governments scrambled for answers, demanding immediate action. Extremist groups escalated their rhetoric, calling for the Lightforge to be destroyed before it could invite further calamity. The world was fracturing under the weight of its first true contact with the unknown. Elena and Amir remained at the center of the storm, trying to decipher the Eidolon's intentions. The Necrolix provided limited guidance, their energy nearly depleted. The threshold demands sacrifice, they warned. To wield the light, you must let go of the darkness within. The words resonated with Elena. Humanity had always struggled with its own shadows: war, greed, division. If they were to survive this trial, they would need to confront their darkest impulses and find a way to unify. But time was running out. The Oblivion Wave, sensing the destabilization of its prey, surged forward with renewed ferocity. The tendrils of shadow reached toward the Lightforge, threatening to engulf it entirely. Elena made a decision. We have to amplify the Lightforge's signal. If we can match the Eidolon's frequency, maybe we can communicate with them on equal terms. That could burn out the entire system, Amir warned. Or worse, it could destabilize the sun itself. It's a risk we have to take, Elena said firmly. If the Eidolon are testing us, we need to show them we're willing to fight, not just for survival, but for our place in the universe. With Amir's reluctant help, the team rerouted every available power source into the Lightforge. As the system reached critical capacity, the beam of light intensified, piercing through the shadows and illuminating the rift with unparalleled brilliance. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The Eidolon responded. Their forms shifted, merging into a single colossal entity that radiated both light and shadow. A final wave of thought crashed over the team, leaving them breathless. It was a single word, echoed across every corner of the globe. Become. And then, the rift began to close. The shadows shrieked as they were pulled back into the void, their tendrils dissolving into nothingness. The Oblivion Wave retreated, but it was not destroyed. It was waiting, watching, just beyond the veil. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, the world was forever changed. The Eidolon had left their mark, and humanity had survived their trial. But the Lightforge remained active, its beam now pulsing faintly with an energy that defied explanation. Elena and Amir stood in the lab, watching the fractal patterns dance across the monitors. What happens now? Amir asked quietly. Elena didn't answer immediately. She gazed at the Lightforge, her mind racing with possibilities. We've crossed the threshold, she said finally. But we still don't know what's on the other side. Humanity had been given a chance not just to survive, but to transcend. But the shadows were still out there, and the rift had left a scar in the fabric of reality. The Henmemet, the Necrolix, the Eidolon, they were all part of a larger tapestry, one that humanity was only beginning to understand. The light carried more than creation. It carried a legacy. And the story was far from over.